I've learned over the years that most crimes don't start with violence. They start with patience. People tend to imagine crime as loud, chaotic, sudden. But the truth is, the most deliberate acts usually begin in silence. With waiting. With watching. With someone deciding, long before anyone else notices, that a line is going to be crossed. January 27th, 2017, was cold by Liverpool standards. The kind of cold that doesn't shock you right away. It settles in slow, gray sky, damp air. A morning that feels heavier than it looks. Folks were heading to work. Shops were opening their doors. Cars moved through familiar streets like they always did. It was the kind of morning most people would forget by lunchtime. And somewhere in a parked car near the Stanley Meat Market complex, someone was waiting. Not pacing. Not nervous. Waiting. Thomas Baker. Folks called him Tommy. He was 44 years old. A father of two. Lived over in Everton. A man people described as steady. Predictable. The kind of person who followed routines because routines made life simpler. Early mornings were part of that. So was working out. The Phoenix gym had become one of those regular stops. A place that felt normal. Safe. Familiar. Security footage later showed Tommy arriving that morning just like any other. Same pace. Same posture. No sign of worry. No hesitation at the door. He didn't look like a man expecting trouble. That tells me something. Either he didn't know danger was coming, or he didn't believe it would ever reach him there. Police believe the gunman arrived well before Tommy finished his workout, nearly an hour early. That detail matters, because sitting in a car for that long, watching a single entrance, takes resolve. It takes commitment. It takes someone who has already made peace with what they're about to do. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This wasn't a split-second decision. It was a plan carried out on schedule. Just after 8:10 that morning, Tommy stepped out of the gym. He turned toward his black BMW parked nearby. It's not a long walk. A few steps. A handful of seconds. That's all it took. Witnesses later said the shots were sharp and sudden. Sounds that don't belong in a weekday morning. Sounds that make people freeze before they understand what they're hearing. The gunman didn't speak. Didn't pause. Didn't linger. Then he was gone. The escape was fast. Investigators later traced a silver or gray Volkswagen Polo leaving the area almost immediately. The license plates had been obscured. Not damaged. Not missing. Obscured. That's an important distinction. The car pulled onto Prescott Road, then moved through Balmoral Road, Molyneux Road, and Queens Road. It didn't hesitate. It didn't double back. It moved like someone who already knew the route, like someone who'd planned the exit just as carefully as the arrival. The escape was fast. Investigators later traced a silver or gray Volkswagen Polo leaving the area almost immediately. The license plates had been obscured. When police arrived, the scene told a clear story. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaotic. It was targeted, controlled, purposeful. But stories like that don't always come with names. In the days that followed, detectives began the slow work that doesn't make headlines. Reviewing CCTV footage, tracking vehicles, knocking on doors, talking to people who might not want to talk. They reconstructed timelines, compared witness accounts, followed threads that looked promising, only to find them unravel under scrutiny. Weeks passed. Arrests were made. 3 men taken into custody in May of that year. More questioning followed. By early 2018, 5 people in total had been brought in for interviews. And then, nothing. No charges. Each release brought frustration. For investigators, for the public, for a family waiting for answers. Because silence has a way of filling the space where explanation should be. One of the hardest things about cases like this is what doesn't get said. Police never publicly named a motive. That wasn't an accident. When investigators choose their words carefully, it's usually because the truth is complicated, or sensitive, or tied to things that can't be spoken out loud until they're proven. All police would say was this: Thomas Baker was targeted. Targeted means this wasn't about money, not about a car, not about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It means someone wanted him, specifically, which raises questions that don't go away with time. Who knew Tommy's routine well enough to predict his movements? Because routines aren't public knowledge, They're learned. Who knew which gym had used? What time had usually left? Where he parked? Who knew enough to be confident that sitting there for nearly an hour wouldn't be wasted time? That waiting says more than the act itself. Waiting like that means the person believed what they were doing was necessary. It means they had already crossed a line mentally long before they crossed the street. This wasn't panic. This was resolve. Then there's a vehicle. A Volkswagen Polo with obscured plates doesn't happen by chance. Someone prepared. Someone thought about cameras, witnesses, and identification. And that raises another question investigators haven't answered publicly. Was the shooter alone? Because clean escapes often aren't solo efforts. Sometimes there's another person involved. Someone who helped plan. Someone who helped watch. Someone who helped make sure nothing went wrong. The police never confirmed that possibility. But they never ruled it out either. And then there's the silence. Liverpool is a city, but it's built from neighborhoods. People notice things. A car parked too long. A person sitting still while the world moves around them. Yet here we are, years later, still waiting. Which leads to one of the hardest truths in cases like this. Someone knows more. Maybe they saw something and didn't realize it mattered. Maybe fear kept them quiet. Maybe loyalty felt stronger than conscience. Or maybe silence felt safer at the time. But safety changes. On the 5th anniversary of Tommy Baker's death, police renewed their appeal. And they said something that sounded simple, but wasn't. They said loyalties and allegiances change. That wasn't meant for everyone. That was meant for someone specific. Because time has a way of loosening what fear once held tight. Relationships shift. Priorities change. The weight of knowing something doesn't get lighter. It gets heavier. Cases like this don't always end with handcuffs or courtroom scenes. Sometimes they end with waiting. Waiting for one person to decide that silence no longer makes sense. Waiting for someone to speak because they can't carry it anymore. Until that happens, Tommy Baker's story remains unfinished. And before we talk about how this story ends, we have to look at the paths investigators believed it might have taken. Officially, police have always said the motive for Thomas Baker's killing remains unclear. That's the careful word they use. Unclear doesn't mean empty. It means complicated. Over time, several lines of inquiry have surfaced through the investigation, and through what authorities have chosen to confirm publicly. One of those lines points towards serious organized crime. Merseyside police have acknowledged they believe the killing was connected to that world. They've also confirmed that Tommy Baker was known to police, though being known is not the same as being convicted. Years earlier, Tommy had been involved in high-profile legal proceedings. In 2002, he was cleared of involvement in a scheme to import drugs from the Netherlands. A jury heard the evidence, and he walked free. But the story didn't end there. Later on, in a separate civil case, the High Court ordered Tommy to forfeit a large sum of money after he was unable to explain the source of his income. No criminal conviction followed, but authorities argued the funds were likely unlawfully obtained. That distinction matters, because acquittal doesn't erase suspicion, and suspicion doesn't disappear just because time passes. Another line of inquiry looked closer to home. In the weeks following Tommy's death, a violent attack took place on Salisbury Street in Everton. A 32-year-old man was seriously injured in what police described as a slashing. Detectives explored whether that incident was connected, whether it was retaliation, or part of an aftershock that followed Tommy's killing. At the time, Merseyside was experiencing a surge in violence. Tommy's murder was the 5th shooting in the region that month. 5 shootings, in 1 month. That pattern led investigators to consider whether his death was part of a broader feud, something spilling over from tensions already burning beneath the surface. When violence clusters like that, it's rarely coincidence. Then there's the way the killing itself was carried out. Some investigators have described it, cautiously, as having the hallmarks of a professional hit. Not because of drama, but because of discipline. The gunman waited nearly an hour. He knew the routine. He chose a moment when escape mattered more than concealment. Despite the busy location and the morning rush, the shooter took steps to avoid identification. The vehicle had obscured plates. The route out was clean. No hesitation. No confusion. That kind of preparation suggests planning. Not an argument. Not a confrontation. A decision already made. None of these theories stand alone. They overlap. They echo each other. Organized crime? Local retaliation? professional planning, and yet none have led to charges, which is why police still describe the motive as unclear, not because there are no ideas, but because none have been proven. And that brings us back to where this case still sits, waiting. I'm Detective Pennyworth, and this is one of those cases that reminds you, some mornings look ordinary. The alarm sounds the same, the street looks the same, people move through their routines without a second thought. You leave the house expecting to come back. You make plans that feel solid. You trust the shape of the day because it's never failed you before, until you realize someone else had already decided how it would end. Not in a rush, not in anger, but with patience. Decided it in silence, decided it while the world kept moving, decided it while the rest of us believed the day would unfold like any other. And that's what stays with you. Not just the violence, but the ordinary moments that came before it. The habits, the routines, the small decisions that felt safe at the time. Because cases like this don't just take a life. They leave behind a question that never quite settles. How many other ordinary mornings are unfolding right now, unaware they're being watched? How many people are walking into a day they trust, not knowing someone else has already written the ending? That's the part that lingers. And until the truth comes out, this story remains unfinished. If you want to stay with these stories, and the truths behind them, you can subscribe to the channel. We'll keep telling the cases that don't always come with answers, but still deserve to be heard.